Hello and welcome back to Bits and Bobs. In today's video we're going to go through the entire history of the sixpence piece, from start to finish the whole history of the sixpence piece from circulation. So the coin was first made in 1551, under the reign of King Edward VI, the boy king. So let's have a look at the first ever sixpence to begin our story. And here it is. We can see to the obverse a portrait of Edward VI, but a good portrait, a good likeness, with him crowned, and the number 6 to his side is not because he's Edward VI, that's on the legend there you can see, that's VI6 as it is a sixpence. We have then the Tudor rose to the other side. We have a mint mark to the top there, no actual date on the coin, mint mark giving the years it could have been made. We have then a long cross and a shield within side. Here's the design closer up. Now the coin weighed, the first issue weighed 3 grams, and this weight remained roughly the same for the whole time the sixpence was made. The diameter here was a bit bigger than some of the later ones at 27mm, so a large diameter there as it's a thin hammered coin. And back in 1551 when it was first made, the sixpence was equal to £11.68 today, so worth more than a £10 note today, was the first ever sixpence when first made in 1551. Now here is the next design. This is the very special and rare Philip and Mary coin, featuring a double portrait to the obverse there. You can see the crown, the date, and then the 2 portraits there of Philip and Mary on the obverse, and then to the reverse we have the crown there, the VI again for sixpence, then a oval-shaped royal coat-of-arms shield. This is a very popular and collectible coin now as part of the sixpence's history. And the next style of sixpence is this one here, an Elizabeth I, with a coat-at-arms royal shield with a long cross running through and the date to the top on the reverse design, and then to the obverse there is the portrait, a left-facing bust of Queen Elizabeth I with the Tudor rose behind her. There's no VI this time, giving us the denomination, as by now people should have learnt and known what size and weight a sixpence was to recognise. The next one is very special as it is the first ever milled coin, and here it is, the early milled sixpence piece, as we can see here. A similar design with the royal coat-at-arms shield and a long cross running through with the date to the top and a mint mark there as well. And the obverse features their portrait again, left-facing, crowned with the rose behind. Now very importantly though, you can see around the edge, around the rim, there is milling, teeth or beads. So this means it cannot be clipped. There are 2 designs, one with more detail to the Queen's portrait. This new milled sixpence weighed 2.83 grams, so a bit less of weight, and that is the same weight that was kept until 1970. Now these coins were very secure and uniform. However, they were very expensive to make compared to the hammered coins of the day, and so they were very shortly after discontinued, and we returned to hammered sixpences for the time being, as we can see here with a James I sixpence. To the obverse we have his right-facing crowned portrait, and the VI for sixpence is back on the obverse. We then have the date above the shield, which is quartered and then further quartered in 2 parts of the shield, so a very detailed design with a legend around both parts of the coin, both sides of the coin. Here is a later issue of James I sixpence. We can see a very similar design with a slightly different portrait and different shield. So there we go. Now we're on to Charles I, who had many slight design changes, but they were all the same in specification, so the same weight and shape and style. There's a few designs to go through. Here is the first one. We can see quite a square shield. We then have a slightly different portrait here for the second one, and a more oval shield to the reverse. We then have a more rounded shield here, and yet another portrait, yet another design change here with the same portrait, but a smaller shield for the reverse design. We then have this design here, a very simple and uniform design there to the reverse, a really nice coin I think, with great detail. Then the final one here, a more round shield we return to, with the date to the top of this one, 1644. Now of course, Charles I did lose his head, and there was no king for a while, as Cromwell ruled the nation. And here we have a Cromwellian sixpence. I will not go too far into Cromwell sixpences as they're not official, but we will do a Cromwell coin video at some point if we have not already. So here is Charles II coin. We have a similar portrait to Charles I and a similar reverse design there with the coat-at-arms shield, and this one has the 4 parts coming off of it, not reaching the very outside of the coin, so a smaller shield within this coin and no barrier for the no sort of border for the legend. The legend is on the same part of the coin. Now that was the last hammered sixpence, as now we go back to milled coins as they are back for good. The new weight set was 3 grams for the weight and 21mm for the diameter of this new milled sixpence that would be released to be used in circulation in favour of the hammered ones. And here it is. We see a right-facing, detailed bust of King Charles with draped clothing, long hair and a laureate in hair, and a very cool design to the reverse there, with 4 crowns, 4 shields, and then 4 sets of 2 interlocked Cs, the Garter star to the centre, the date to the top, and the legend around. So a very, very cool design to adorn the first ever milled sixpence that would be here to stay of the first type. Here is the James II one after Charles I. We have a very similar design here, with the 4 crown shields and Garter star in the centre. However, of course, the 2 Cs interlocked have been removed, as it's no longer Charles. They have not been replaced by 2 interlocking Js for James II, whose portrait is there on the obverse. We then have another double portrait sixpence here. This is of William and Mary to the obverse, a very cool detailed portrait, again with laureates and long hair, and a very cool reverse design with the line of orange to the centre rather than the Garter star. We then have the date to the centre as well, very unique, and 4 sets of 2 interlocked letters, W and M, for William and Mary, going around the coin in the gaps between the shields. So a very cool design, this coin for sure, and a great coin for collectors who love the double portraits once again. We then have William's reign by himself, and a very similar design here. His portrait is alone, and the W's names have been removed, but the same design stays with the line of orange and 4 crown shields, legend around and date to the top. And of course the size and shape remains the same, a round coin, 3 grams, 21mm at this time. And at the time of Queen Anne, who is the next monarch, having her coins made with sixpences included. Here's a 1711 sixpence. We have the same design there, 4 crowns, but now the Garter star has returned, rather than the line of orange, and of course her portrait is now in the obverse, a very cool left-facing bust. We then have George I, and again a similar design, with the 4 crown shields about a central Garter star. We have his right-facing laureate and draped clothing bust on the obverse, and a last detail to the reverse, you can see the SSC is there twice, SSC twice. This stands for the South Sea Company, and this SSC appeared on some George I sixpences back in the day, and we're now into the 1720s for the era. As you can see, the date there still to the top of the coin. Next up is George II, who had 2 designs. Here's the first, again a very similar design, Garter star and 4 crown shields, date to the top, legend around. And rather than the SSC, we now have 2 roses and 2 French lilies in between the shields. And we have his portrait there, that was the young portrait, and here's the aged portrait. We can see a little bit different, obviously a little bit older on his portrait, and we now have the removal of the roses and lilies, and just having some gaps there in between the shields. Now here is the last of these style of sixpences. This is a George III one, an early one, from 1787 here. We have again 4 shields and 4 crowns. The crowns are not on the shields this time. There's a very large Garter star to the centre, and the date is now to the bottom, with a long legend around, and a right-facing bust of George III on the obverse, looking very cool there in a military-style uniform. Now there's a very large gap of sixpences not being made between 1787 all the way to 1816, a very large gap, and when they returned, they were very different. You can see, of course, a different design and different portrait, but that was not all that changed. This coin has 2 crown shields set within a garter, and then a right-facing bust of George III to the obverse. Now these are the new coins after the Great Recoinage of 1817. The new weight of 2.83 grams, well that was the same, but the new diameter of 19mm. So these coins were now set as part of the Great Recoinage and could be valued by weight, along with all other silver denominations from the time. So let's go through the designs. Here we have a George IV one, a beautiful design with a floral shield there, a Royal Hanoverian shield inside, with some flowers, national flowers around it, and the date to the bottom there, Anno 1821, and a left-facing bust of George IV to the obverse. Here's a second design of George IV. We still have the 2 shields, Hanoverian and Royal shield, crowned within a garter this time, and the date there to the bottom is smaller, and the same portrait there, the obverse, left-facing, and it was done by Benedetto Pesciucci. You may recognise his name in the designing world. Here is the final design for George IV. We now have a crowned lion above the St Edward's crown, with the national flowers below, and a older portrait, the later portrait of George IV, to the obverse, his second bust, which is my least favourite of the 2. And the date is now to the bottom of the obverse, 1829 in this case. We then have this design released in 1831. You may be familiar with this design by Jean-Baptiste Melen. We have a crown to the top, to the centre the words sixpence, a wreath around, and the date to the bottom, in this case 1834. And of course in that year we have the portrait of William IV to the obverse. Now the same design came to the reverse of Queen Victoria's coins, now having her portrait of course to the obverse. This is the young head, or bun head, and was done by William Wyan. But the coins still bore the same reverse design of the crown and wreath. Now for the Jubilee it was changed. We have here the Jubilee head, of course, and then a design harking back to the older ones with a garter around and then a crowned royal shield there with the date below. This was used for the Jubilee and the Jubilee years of Queen Victoria, so for a few years after her Jubilee. And then in 1893 we returned to this design again with the same reverse design there still, but this is now a new portrait of Victoria to the obverse, her final portrait, the veiled head, old head or widowed head, done by Thomas Brock, and of course you can see there a large veil on the portrait. Now even into the reign of Edward VII, this design was still kept on the sixpence, so it must have been very popular. We have of course a new portrait to the obverse of Edward VII, done by George William de Soules. Now finally, in 1911, the design was changed for George V's coins, reminiscent of the George IV sixpence, with the crowned lion above the crown, as that is what the design is, with a border around this time and the denomination of sixpence to the bottom, with legend around the top, and of course around the portrait of George V. Now a huge change came to the sixpence in 1920. All this time it had been sterling silver, but this year it was debased to only 50% silver and 50% manganese, to reduce the cost of making the coins. Although the composition was changed, at this point there was no change to the design. The same design was used for the reverse of the sixpence. The change of design would come in 1927 when this design here was released. The same portrait of George V to the obverse, but the reverse now shows 6 acorns, 6 oak leaves and 6 branches, of course 6 of each as is a sixpence, as it says to the top there, with a great design here by George Kruger Gray, now adorning the sixpence piece. It then changed to the reign of George VI. We have his portrait now to the obverse, done by Humphrey Paget. We now have a new design to the reverse, with a crowned set of initials, GRI, George Rex Imperator, King George Emperor, then the word sixpence at the bottom, and the date 1937, to each side. Now another major event for the sixpence came in 1947, when it was fully debased to no silver. Coins made in 1947 and after contained no silver after World War II, so there was now no silver in the sixpence piece. And we have a new design here from 1949 onwards, with a crown above their initials again, now this time just saying GR, no I. He was no longer Emperor of India. We have the VI in the middle for George VI, and the word sixpence as the denomination to the bottom. Then the last design here, we have this one as a Queen Elizabeth one, with the 4 flowers of the nations there, the word sixpence and the date to the bottom, then the new portrait of the young Queen, to the obverse there we can see, done by Mary Gillick, and it's a right-facing bust, laureate of Queen Elizabeth II when she was young. Then the legend was slightly tweaked after 1953 to a new, shorter legend around the obverse of the coin. And that is it. The last circulation issue was in 1967, there was then this one made in 1970 as a farewell in a proof set, and then they were finally demonetised in 1980 after serving as a 2.5p piece for a short while after decimalisation through public appeal to keep using the sixpences. And for a long while that was it. The death of the sixpence had come after all these centuries. But in 2016 they began making them again for Christmas. As a collectible coin here we can see one from 2022 with the Queen to the obverse later portrait, and a new design here to the reverse with the crown above the royal cipher within a wreath. They also do them in gold. They do them in gold and silver each year for Christmas to be bought by collectors, just as a little sort of keepsake for the year, as a Christmas sixpence each year for the collectors of the coins in gold or silver. So the sixpence piece is still in production ever since 1551. A long-lived and popular coin, so please do comment down below your favourite era and design of the sixpence. And as well, please do subscribe. That means a lot to us and will help out our channel no end. Of course, thank you for watching, and we'll see you again soon for some more coins in the future on Bits and Bobs.